everyone. Welcome to another episode of Gray Matter. Well, like him, love him, or hate him, there's no question that the man of the age right now is Elon Musk, whether it's building massive corporations with technologies like self driving cars and futuristic robots, defending free speech by taking over Twitter and calling it X, developing self landing robots and planning to colonize Mars, or helping Donald Trump win an election and stripping bare government waste and corruption. He is a person worthy of our interest. Perhaps in 500 years, he might be spoken of in the same way that we talk about Christopher Columbus today. So I thought it'd be great to have somebody on the program who knows a lot more about Elon Musk than we do and can enlighten us on some of the things that make up who he is and why he does what he does and why what he does is so fascinating. And so we have on the program today Dennis Kneale. Who's written a new book called The Leadership Genius of Elon Musk. Welcome to the program, Dennis. It's great to have you on Gray Matter today.
Thanks so much for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to it. I love talking about Elon. Is my timing on this book, Leighton, incredibly good, or does it turn out to be incredibly bad now that so many people have been enlisted into, keying his cars and attacking his
Mhm.
dealerships and turning him into a villain somehow?
What a great question. I mean, one thing we know about him is that he seems to be very adept at overcoming adversity. So
Sure
I
does.
wouldn't bet. I certainly wouldn't bet against this man. So before
Actually,
we go ahead.
if I may say today, I think a lot of people try to kind of draw attention to themselves by shopping for umbrage, by being upset about something, by complaining, by being aggrieved. And my book offers 11 lessons of Elon, one per chapter, explaining his success. And lesson three says, hey, the highest nail gets pounded down first, so strap on a helmet. I mean, he thrives on that controversy. Let them, come at him and attack him. He's like a superhero who gets stronger for it, it seems.
Interesting. Well, before we introduce you properly, we're going to go to our framing aphorisms. And these all have an Elon Musk flavor. In fact, they're all from the great man, as it were. The first one is he says, "We are running the most dangerous experiment in history right now, which is to see how much carbon dioxide the atmosphere can handle before there is an environmental catastrophe." The second one is he says the lobbying power of large government contractors is far higher than it should be for the good of the people. I have to agree with him there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, not only is he involved in the environment and reduction of government waste, he's also a pioneer in artificial intelligence. And he says this: with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. And all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, it's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. It didn't work out, he says. And finally, he says, if you go back a few hundred years, what we take for granted today would seem like magic. Being able to talk to people over long distances, to transmit images, flying, accessing vast amounts of data like an oracle, these are all things that would have been considered magic a few hundred years ago. I think that portrays some of the foresight that this man has. Well, speaking of foresight, let's talk about our guest, Dennis Neal. He is an award winning journalist, media strategist, and host of the podcast What's Bugging Me, which we're going to talk about, which is on the Ricochet Network. He was an anchor at CNBC, won't hold that against him, and Fox Business after serving as senior editor at the Wall Street Journal and managing editor of Forbes. He helped the late, great Lou Dobbs write the best selling book, The Trump Century: How Our President Changed the Course of History Forever. That book is going to be added to our reading list along with Dennis's book today. Dennis lives in Brooklyn, New York, surprisingly, from that backdrop, and he dreams of having dinner with Elon Musk someday. I'm betting on him. I would think that if Elon reads Dennis's book, he's probably going to get that dinner date.
Yeah.
So, Dennis, let's start here. Just broadly speaking, what is it about Elon Musk do you think that captivates the attention of the public so much?
I think it's just this truly huge vision. I mean, lesson 9 or 10 in my 11 lessons of Elon in my book says dream huge and be willing to spend decades pursuing it, okay? So, right now, I think today, there's flight number 9 for Starship, the largest spacecraft ever put into the sky. It's 100 feet taller than the Statue of Liberty on her pedestal. And, that's been a dream that started in year 2000 when James Cantrell, a rocket scientist that I interview for the book, takes young Elon to meet with Moscow rocket engineers. They're the best in the world because they have the most powerful ICBMs. The Soviet Union is broken up. The US is trying to get him to move into rocketry instead. And so Elon wants to buy 2 rockets. They ask him why, because I want to go to Mars. They spit on his shoes. They're so offended by the boldness of it. And they sowed the seeds of their own demise, as Cantrell points out, because he goes on to decide, I'll do it myself. A rocket's nothing but stainless steel and fuel. He strips it down to the most basic first principles. And then he decides, we'll do it ourselves. And he doesn't today. They have 80% of the launches around the world are SpaceX. The Russians are nothing. They've been devastated by the competition from his company, and yet they had a chance to be in business with him from the start.
Mhm. I often wonder when you look at people like Elon Musk, and of course, there aren't very many of them. In the one sense, it's fascinating because we wouldn't want everybody to be like Elon Musk. That wouldn't work out very well for humanity. But humanity really needs people like Elon Musk to drive us into the future, don't we? For
Yes.
example, most people probably shake their heads. Well, why does he want to go to Mars? They can't really wrap their heads around that. But it's people like Elon Musk that really drive, us forward into the future, don't they?
Yeah, the outliers, the freaks, really, the ones who are, and part of it is a willingness to fail, you know?
Yeah,
I mean, a
yeah.
lot of us today, we, like that poet said, live lives of quiet desperation. We don't take
Mhm,
the big risk. We don't tell someone we admire from afar that we love them. We don't kind of go for that risky job. We just kind of make do with less. And this guy is always reaching for more. And lesson 9, I think it is, or 10 says, it's better to launch and burn than it is to never launch at all. And this guy has had explosion after explosion and trying to get Starship to be able to get into outer space, then return and get hugged by 2 giant chopsticks. And he's making it work more and more frequently, but only after failing again and again. And he sees failure as this necessary and almost fun step on the way to success because you learn thousands of times with each failed launch. And that's what's working
mhm,
for him every time the media jeers. Oh, rocket ship explodes on platform. Rocket ship, tips over after landing. But what they're not getting is no one else in the world is putting a rocket ship into space, bringing it down, landing it on a drone in the ocean, okay? No one else has ever done that. No one else has ever dared even conceive of it. And just that ability to totally make it up is
mhm.
just, transcendent. I mean, he's equal parts, isn't he? Don't you think, Leighton? He's Einstein, Edison, Jobs, and P.T. Barnum.
Mhm, mhm. This really, an incredible combination. It's funny you talk about success and failure. If there's anyone in the sporting world who rivals Elon in this sense. It's Michael Jordan. And when I think of Michael Jordan, I think of the same qualities that you just described. In fact, there was a great television commercial you probably remember back in the 1990s when Michael Jordan was at the height of his powers with the Chicago Bulls. It was all in black and white. And throughout the television commercial, it shows Michael Jordan throwing various shots and them rimming out or missing the hoop and things like this. And he goes on, I've taken X many shots at the buzzer. And then he says, I've missed this many shots, game-winning shots. And then at the end, the ball's just bouncing and it says, I fail, therefore I succeed. And this is an important thing about the mindset of
Nice.
people like Elon Musk that really is not well understood by people, is it?
I just got goosebumps at that. That's really something. And it's such an important lesson for young people, especially. I think a lot of young people today are lost. They don't have a good career track. They haven't found something both that they want to do, love to do, and that is of value. And so they hook on to these protests about things that really have no direct impact on their daily life in any way, but they feel better about something because they have something that they can pretend to believe in. And instead, you could believe in yourself and take on more risk and dream bigger. The thing that struck me as I did more research on this, Elon's dreams are even bigger than we know.
Mhm.
The thing to get into Mars, and by the way, do you know that in 2026, like the second half of 2026 is this window, it's like once every 2 years where you can slingshot to Mars in only like 9 months. So he wants to send a rocket ship there, have an Optimus robot on it, get off and walk around on Mars, okay, looking at things and sending back. I mean, it's incredible, right? And yet Mars is only the start. After we get to Mars, well, what happens if Mars blows up? We need to be on a moon of Jupiter. From there, what happens if that blows up? We may need to be in the asteroid belt. The same goes for the Neuralink brain chip. The other day, I'm on X and I see an account with only 2,600 followers, and a guy says, "Hey, I have ALS. I've lost the ability to communicate, but I'm talking to you right now through this brain chip I just got. I'm the third person to get it in the world.
Mhm.
I'm able to communicate and write this message just by thinking." Well, it's not just paraplegics, ALS patients, amputees. He's going to help with his brain chip because one day he'll take an Olympus robot arm and attach it to an amputee and operate it with the brain chip. Synergy from his different companies. But it's not just that. Elon thinks that in 30 years, we're going to have millions of people, regular able bodied people, walking around with a Neuralink brain chip because it's going to let you communicate much faster with AI. He says that right now, AI is so fast that asking you a question and waiting for an answer feels like it's talking to a tree that may never answer. And so your chip will be able to go, lickety split with this, with the AI. I think it's a little bold. I'm not doing it, but just that he even thinks in this way is exhilarating.
It really is remarkable. I saw a gentleman, in an interview who had suffered a stroke and hadn't been able to talk to his family for many years and was able to communicate with them through the Neuralink chip. And, really, it almost brings you to tears. Folks, we're talking with, Dennis Neal, who's written, a really great new book called The Leadership Genius of Elon Musk. And so where we're talking about him, talk about Elon Musk in the book. One of the things that fascinates me, Dennis, about Elon Musk is that unlike, say, someone like Jeff Bezos, who is a brilliant entrepreneur, but who seems to make money and do business for its own sake, that is, to make money. Elon Musk seems to use money, have a great ability to make money, a genius for it, let's face it, that seems to be a means to an end for him. That is, it's not about making the money, and some of the things that he does on the face of it don't seem like very great financial investments going in. Take, for example, the acquisition of Twitter, which is enormously expensive. He had to leverage the stock of his car company to do it. But in the end, the end he wanted to achieve, I think, was to secure and defend free speech online.
Yeah,
That's a really, distinguishing feature about him
right. He
in
didn't do
relation
it
to
to make
people like Jeff
money.
Bezos,
Right, he
isn't
didn't
it?
do it to make money at all.
Yeah.
Lesson 6 says, Free speech is everything. Stand up and be heard." So he was forced by a Delaware court to go through with the $44 billion acquisition. Stocks had tumbled, tech especially. He wanted to back out. He had to go through with it. They lost 60% of the value after the first year, and everyone said Twitter was dead. And yet he transformed that
Mhm.
into an amazing platform, the most important media platform of our age, right? Gosh, you had a lot of threads that are now forgotten, a few of them because well, a couple of things I want to point out. Um, he continually bet almost half his fortune or more every time of his own money on each trade up to the next company, right? No one else does that. They raise other people's money. Then after you've got the first few billion, it no longer means anything. He does want to save the world. Now, in Jeff Bezos' defense, because that guy crashed a dinner party of mine once when I was the managing editor of Forbes, and he sat at my table for an hour. And we both grew up in Hialeah, and he is just a great guy and so much fun. And let's remember a couple things. First, it improves the quality of life to be able to order a hard to get product or that I'd have to go a half-hour drive
Oh,
away to
yeah.
get and
This is
have it
true.
show up on my doorstep the
Yeah.
next day or that day. It's an amazing service, number one. Number two, you know, Amazon's worth over $1 trillion in market cap, right? And at some points, I think it might even been to 3 trillion. This guy's worth like 150 billion, Bezos. And that means even though that's too much money for any one man to have, he created wealth of $1 trillion or more that is now
Mhm.
today held by other people and pension funds for nurses and firefighters. And so, people decry Bezos for his wealth, and yet he did a lot for society anyway, right? It's just that Elon then comes along, and yes, his Tesla, I think it might be near $1 trillion market cap again. And yes, he's created all that wealth, but then he's got this do-gooder, want to save the world stuff. Really, a noblesse oblige. This is my sacred obligation. It's a little grandiose and arrogant if you think about it. And
Yeah.
my gosh, it must be intoxicating to have that kind of confidence and self belief, to think that you could actually even pull it off, to be willing to fail at trying to do it. And I think
Mhm.
that living large and out loud is just something that we both admire but resent. You know, Trump and Elon both are hated by a lot of the same people. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. No wonder they came together. And I
Mhm.
say in the conclusion of the book, I wonder if one reason so many people resent them both is because we are raised to be modest. Avoid bragging. Don't be all about yourself. Oh, no, no, honestly, really, he did the great job there. No, 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 no. And these guys are wearing their ego on their sleeve and say, look what I did. These guys changed the world just by putting words out there into the universe. And I think, some people are really put off by that and they resent it. I think it's thrilling.
Mhm. Well, I know that the left is irritated by the fact that Elon Musk is far and away the most successful African American, uh,
Yeah.
especially nowadays when they want to keep,
Oh my gosh.
these poor people from South Africa out of the country.
Yes.
But talking about you for a second now, Dennis, you're a very accomplished person in your own right. You've been very successful in media, Forbes editor. You could have written a book about any number of topics. In fact, you helped to write Lou Dobbs's book about Trump.
Yeah.
What was it specifically that drew you to this topic, that you
You know,
made you want to write this book?
He is just the most amazing figure of our time. We are lucky to have him. He's one of the most extraordinary things to come along in 100 years. And, the first time I ever heard about the guy, I was a anchor at Fox Business. I'm in my office, and there's a producer outside there, this young gal who has been talking to a friend who's on a yacht that summer with Elon. And she said, "Oh, yeah, Elon Musk." And "Who's that?" It sounded to me like a men's cologne, you know? And, but then that gave me this kind of what is it, like a paparazzi or a voyeuristic kind of then you're hearing about things, and so I became fascinated with him then, and then just thing after thing. Now, at first, I was a little skeptical because, Tesla, all right, it's selling electric cars in California where you get $7,500 gift from the government, okay? So, I mean, is it really real? But then Model Y becomes the best-selling car of any kind, combustion or anything, in the world, outselling Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Audi. Just incredible that he could do that in a matter of a decade or so. And
Mhm.
just, I mean, you've got to admire it.
Mhm.
And so what motivates him? Now, one theme in the leadership genius of Elon Musk is, do you have to be a jerk to achieve greatness? I mean,
Mm.
this guy, he angers a lot of people, okay? He'll come up against some guy on X platform who insults him, some guy with like 5,000 followers, and he'll just like smash him, crush him. And a reporter asks him, "What are you doing, man?" It's just a little guy, and he'll say, "Hey, I figure if you step into the arena, that's what it's like when you get on X, and so you've got to take as good as I guess maybe I should hold back." But he doesn't hold back on a whole lot, does he? And I think that's one
No.
reason I love him so much. You don't
Mhm.
spend a year or two of your life working on something and chasing after it because you're writing about a guy you detest. I
Mhm.
mean, I
You
like
know,
this guy.
yeah,
I
I do too. And one of the other things that's so compelling about him, and I think is for many Americans, is of course there's a lot of talk these days about immigration, about deporting, let's say, the wrong kind of immigrant.
Yeah.
But it's also true, Dennis, though, isn't it, that when Americans see someone come from a foreign country and fully adopt American values and succeed. This is a very compelling story. We've seen other people do this. I mean, I don't care for Arnold Schwarzenegger's politics, but you have to admire that story. Coming from a
Yes.
little town in Austria,
Yeah.
coming to America, adopting American values, educating himself, becoming a success in bodybuilding, and then acting, and then becoming the governor of California. These guys who come to America and adopt American values and succeed are very endearing to the American public, aren't they? Do you
We are
agree with me? And
happy.
why do you
Yeah.
think that is?
Well, okay, so first of all, that is a classic immigrant's tale. That is an American story, that up by the bootstraps. And there's that saying, we are a land of immigrants. We are all immigrants, because our ancestors came over here. And we love that. The thing that bothers me, though, is that to our credit, we used to be the land of opportunity, and we celebrated that.
Right.
And in more recent years, some politicians, especially on the left,
Yeah.
especially in the Obama era, were turning us into a land of envy.
Mhm.
And they started talking about the inequality gap between the rich and the poor. And they started talking more about how do you hammer down the top instead of building up the bottom, you know? I mean,
Mhm.
this idea that, the top 1% don't pay their fair share. What's the fair share? What do you want it to be? Because the top 1% pays almost 40% of income taxes, even though they control 20% of annual income. So what do you want that number to be? And, this constant, and they're just doing it purely to win points, purely to try to win votes. And that kind of negativity and envy it only goes so far. And I think the
Mhm.
backlash came with the election of Donald Trump all
Right.
3 times.
Yeah.
Bada deep, bada bing. I'm just kidding. Twice.
And again, Donald Trump is himself a great American story, isn't it? And is there something about the American character, the American story, that produces these people, these highly successful people?
Yeah.
'Cause let's face it, the U.S. produces more of them.
Yes,
Uh,
we are
whether
the
it's
most incredibly creative,
right.
robust community and economy in the world. Over half of the
Mhm.
new drugs, the miracle drugs invented every
Right.
year, come from the US because we were the only market in the world that allowed drug makers to charge as much as they wanted without any caps at all, so that we ended up subsidizing cheap drug prices for the rest of the world, where the drug makers didn't push for high prices and the governments were capping prices. This is something Trump wants to fix now. But people come here to innovate. They come here to have a
Right.
shot at making
Elon
something.
Musk is one of
Yeah,
them, right?
yeah. And why don't Americans get that? Why do we have almost 40% of able-bodied Americans out of the workforce entirely, not counted as unemployed, sitting on the sofa at home? Do you know, and I do a whole chapter on hard work, because one lesson says most people are loafers. Work harder than you ever have
Yeah.
before if you want to get ahead. Do you know that right now, 15% of young men, like 25 years old, have gone a whole year without any paycheck at all? They have no connection to the workforce. They sit at home, and yet they spend only 46 minutes per day more on home chores than men who work full time. And
Mhm.
and they do less to help other family members than family members who work full time. What are they doing? They're playing video games. Surveys say that the far more realistic video games are responsible for 70% of the reduction in work hours. Young people are working something like 20 or 25% less per year than we worked 25 years ago. They're a bunch of lazy loafers, and they really ought to wake up and go do something productive. That's part of what's behind DOGE, and Elon saying to government employees, "Man, why don't you go get a real job?"
Yeah.
Yeah. Folks, we're talking with Dennis Neal, who is the author of a great new book about Elon Musk as a subject of our talk. Um, and we're also talking about, you were just talking about hard work. I remember hearing Elon Musk talk about how he slept for months in the Tesla factory. That
Yes, and
that
I
level
think
of
Fremont,
commitment.
California, on the factory floor. He didn't even bring in a bed. 3 months every day, they were trying to reach an outrageous goal that he had set of 5,000 Model 3s, I think it was,
Yeah.
produced each month or something, and he told Wall Street, and Wall Street short sellers were betting against him, and they're just waiting for a big surprise announcement. Oh, we haven't been able to do it. We've had some problems, and then the stock would tumble, and they'd rake in billions. And so he did it. He said later because he wanted his workers to know that he was willing to go through as much pain and suffering as they were to get this done. And they made
Mhm.
the goal. They came through it. Short sellers in recent years have lost $60 billion betting against Tesla. He put one guy I know, James Chanos, out of business. Chanos was a very famous, very smart
Yeah.
short seller who
Mhm.
nonetheless lost his shirt betting against Elon Musk and Tesla. He
Mhm.
insisted that Tesla was going to be another Enron. He couldn't be more wrong. That's got to make Elon feel pretty good. I got to
And
tell you.
that's part of his principle of leadership, isn't it? This idea that I believe Albert Einstein had a famous quotation. He said, "There's only three ways to influence people. First is example, the second is example, the third is example." And Elon Musk really lives that out. I wanted to ask you though, Dennis, about sort of a strange marriage, if you will, between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, because looking back historically, I recall that, Elon Musk in the Obama era was very supportive of the Obama era environmental restrictions, and actually, I believe Musk he actually resigned from a board post when Donald Trump became president in 2017 and pulled America out of the Paris Accords, and then just last year. In He said, Elon Musk posted on X, he said, "Just to be clear, I'm not donating money to either candidate for US president." And then going back to July of 22, he tweeted, in talking about Trump, "I don't hate the man, but it's time for Trump to hang up his hat and sail into the sunset." And then more recently than that, November 23, he says, in deciding between Biden and Trump, he says, "This is definitely a difficult choice here, almost like a dilemma." And yet here we have now, this incredibly powerful,
Right.
marriage between these two. I mean, you could make a really strong case to say that but for Elon Musk, maybe Donald Trump doesn't win the 2024 election. What do
And
you think
I
was the
think,
cause
okay,
for the
so a couple
change?
things. So first of all, it's not the 250 million that he gave. It's the X platform, freeing it, letting
Oh,
Trump
yeah.
on the
Oh,
platform,
yeah.
letting the
Mhm.
other side be heard. Our government, it was the most rampant, worst violation of our First Amendment rights by government in ever in history, really. Thousands of conservative voices that millions of other Americans had the right to hear, and our government, got social media to censor them. Just awful, just awful. Now, where were we going with that? What else did you want to know about that?
Well, I wanted to know what do you think
Oh, how'd
caused
they come
the
together?
yeah, what was the
Yeah.
shift, do you think, for Elon Musk that made him
Yes.
change his
Okay.
mind about Trump? I
Right.
mean,
So,
you told us in part, but I'm interested to get your
yeah.
insight here.
So a couple more things. I mean, first of all, can you believe that Donald Trump is willing to forgive those past transgressions from Musk? Isn't that interesting? I mean, I love that he said, I don't care. If you're my friend now, if we can make use of each other now to reward our friends and punish our
Mhm.
enemies, let's
That's
do it.
that's one of his best traits, isn't it, as a leader?
Right. So
Yeah.
look, I think both of them have so many shared traits. They both believe in overpromising and setting huge goals. And if you fall short, so what? You got two or three times as far as you ever would have if you set a normal goal, right?
Yeah.
So they both do that. They both, don't suffer fools gladly or otherwise, and they just punch back, and that's something that always has bothered a lot of people about Donald Trump. Be more presidential. Don't be so petty. Don't take the bait and respond. And yet, a lot of his supporters love that he doesn't take that guff and he gives it back. And that because
Mhm.
you know what? Our country almost lost its way with a lot of us sitting silent and not speaking up and saying, "What are you doing? What is with these riots? What is with this anti-white rhetoric? What is this freaking DEI? How dare you?" No one was standing up. We were too afraid of being canceled. Do you know that I bet you don't know this, that after the death of George Floyd, which a rival medical examination argued was from a drug overdose. But after his terrible, tragic death, and those cops blew that, and they were too rough for it. After that, in the 3 years after that, there was a total of 3 or 4 years, like 3 million jobs created. And by the S&P 500 largest companies in the economy. And white employment went down in that period by net 906,000 jobs
Wow.
because companies weren't hiring whites. In the first year
Mhm.
after the George Floyd death, S&P 100 largest companies hired something like 400,000 jobs, and whites got 4% of them. Yet whites are 58% of the population in the US. Now, this was clearly an overreaction and an utterly biased reaction, an anti-white reaction, but no one said a word about it. You don't dare.
Mhm. Mhm.
But Elon Musk has, and he's been paying the price, hasn't he? I saw a recent piece in the Mises Institute. It talked about the far left's violent attacks on Tesla and how they reveal really the darkness of the left and their
What? Yeah.
reaction to Trump. And then Elon Musk's reaction is, he says, basically on political spending, he says, I think I've done enough. But he's really suffered, hasn't he? These attacks in Las Vegas, South Carolina, Portland,
It cost
and
his
Boston.
if his personal wealth went down $113 billion at one point.
Wow.
He's
Wow.
had thousands of death threats, 2 actual assassination attempts in the past few years, not necessarily since DOGE. But 100 years from now, they're going to talk about the mass hysteria and the Trump derangement syndrome, in the Democrat Party. They
Mhm.
stoked this. They organized and orchestrated this. And
Yeah.
and when Musk just did his remote interview with a Bloomberg reporter in Dubai, and he said, "Look, the people are going to jail. They're going to prison." It's
Yeah.
like they're a bitter ex-girlfriend, key in his cars. But
Yeah.
he said, "But there are people, there are organizations that organize this, and we're going after them." And he said, "We're gonna get you. We're coming after you." And he
Mhm.
pointed a finger at the camera. And I
Well, there
can't
is
wait
this
to
there is
see a
this
FSC
FBI, task
service.
force, isn't there? Pam Bondi has organized this task force
Yeah.
to investigate this,
Yeah, and then
and,
when to hear the Democrats, it's lawfare. They're going after their enemies. You guys have what did you do to Donald Trump? How can you even dare bring that up? And it's because they think we're stupid, and they know that their media lapdog allies, will memory hole what they did,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah.
rest of us won't, and that's why we have X.
Mhm.
and, Elon Musk, in previous times, has been very vigilant in defense of free speech. In fact, the attack that's been on Tesla in the US has followed attacks from the Australian government, where he took legal action against them after a contentious demand from the country's safety commission to remove posts that they found objectionable um, about human sexuality. And then there's the Keir Starmer
Yeah,
government.
in the
They
UK.
claim that, yeah, that they're drafting plans
Unbelievable.
to force social media platforms, including X, to censor legal but harmful speech and so-called
They're
fake
putting
news and
people in
misinformation.
jail. They're
Yeah.
putting people in jail in the UK. Our sister, our longtime, they're putting people in jail for words they put
Wow.
online. And by the way, politicians will do it here if they can. They will do it here. Look at how President Biden, Vice President Harris, AOC, Elizabeth Warren, John Kerry, Robert Reich. I have examples which all of them in the past year or two were and the CEO of NPR lamenting the First Amendment and that it's an
Yeah.
obstacle to their attempts to make sure that they rule out disinformation.
Mhm.
They'll do it here if they can, if we let them. And I'm amazed. I'm so distressed that 1/3 of Americans think it's more important to stop hate speech than it is to protect free speech when the First Amendment protects hate speech. And another
Mhm.
third of Americans, they're not sure. You fools. You're going to be giving up your rights. Without free speech, you cannot criticize government. You cannot force government to change if you can't complain about it, right? It's
Mhm.
just terrible. And that Australia and the EU, across the EU examples of, and the UK, shame on all of them. And I'm sorry to filibuster here, but let me just finish this last thing or I'll forget it. Here's where we got ourselves into trouble. We allowed this phrase, harmful content, to enter
Yes.
the lexicon as if words can leap off a screen or a page and smack us in the face. No, it's a person who does that. And if they do that, don't blame the words he read, blame him for smacking you in the face. But we've
Mhm.
decided content can be harmful. And then once you decide that, well, now we have to protect people from it by censoring it.
Mhm, mhm, this is a very important point that you raised because, of course, in Great Britain, we've seen stories of people being arrested and sent to jail for lengthy periods of time for online posts. There is legislation, that's in place in Canada. A man in Winnipeg, Manitoba, recently was charged under new hate speech laws in Canada. The First Amendment is very, very key, and Elon Musk's defense of that has been really, really crucial. And when you talk about misinformation and disinformation, Dennis, I mean, could there be a more shining example of this than how the media and the Biden administration lied to Americans and lied to the world about President Biden's health condition?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
And then one of the biggest perpetrators of it, Jake Tapper,
Right.
who was demeaning Lara Trump, the presidential daughter-in-law, for going after Biden and questioning that. He writes a book saying, "Oh my gosh, it's so terrible that they did this cover-up." My gosh, the boulder-sized balls on that man to do that, I gotta kinda admire him for it.
Mhm.
My gosh, just awful. Just awful. That is misinformation and disinformation. And what bothered me during the Twitter files, which was the worst violation of the First Amendment ever, the media buried the story. They were not upset because it was conservative voices.
Mhm.
And I wrote more columns and more podcasts on the Twitter files scandal because I, as a 30-year journalist, was truly offended by it than the entire staff of the New York Times and the Washington Post combined.
Really?
They looked the
Incredible.
other way. But what
Mhm.
they don't realize is that the Trump administration asked Twitter before Elon bought it, I believe this was.
Mhm.
Yeah, asked Twitter to censor 5,500 liberal accounts.
Yeah.
So, if the Republicans get in control, they will do the very same thing. First Amendment protects the people; it doesn't protect, you know, political parties. But I think we need a law passed imposing criminal and civil penalties on government bureaucrats and elected officials who violate our First Amendment rights,
Yep,
because
you
the
call it
people
the
who did
Fauci
this will
law.
pay their own price.
Y
Sorry?
y You call it the Fauci law.
Yeah.
I got to know, a wonderful man who's now the head of your NIH now, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya.
Oh,
He was
yeah.
an expert witness in a case that I did in Canada. Just an incredibly brilliant mind and just the heart of a lion. He was one of the people, as you know, who was really taken apart by Fauci. It's wonderful to see people like he and RFK Jr. to be vindicated and made part of the Trump administration,
Yeah.
because they believe fervently, as you do, in the First Amendment and the protection of free speech.
Yeah.
In fact, Dr. Bhattacharya talked about it on my program in the context of science, how science is this conversation across time, and the whole idea of science is to have dissenting opinions, because that's
Yes.
how
That
you
was the
arrive
idea.
at the truth. And when you start to censor opinions the way Fauci did and others, that really destroys the integrity of science, and fundamentally, it's an attack on free speech. So it's interesting to see all the computations and permutations of the First Amendment and how much it protects, how vital it is to the whole American project, isn't it?
Right. And how much it's being violated everywhere. This
Mm,
censorship runs throughout society now. I hired a PR service where I post press releases about my podcast and about the book. And the PR service, this wire service that I pay money to, I just want you to place it on the websites, as many as possible, and shut up about it. They've got websites. I'm sorry, we can't take this release. It has President Trump's name in the title. And that could be hurt people's feelings or upset some people. I'm being rejected for my press releases talking about what I'm saying on my podcast because they're saying this could be harmful content. It could upset some people. You know what? What happened to us? When did we turn into such pusillanimous wussies who are so hurt? The way to combat offensive content tent and hate speech is not by muzzling it, it's by flooding the zone with more better speech. I mean,
Mhm.
that's what you do. You know, after he bought Twitter, within a week or two, this university comes out with some study and it makes headlines everywhere. Oh, there's been a, 150% increase in anti-Semitic content to the platform. Well, part of it was wags who were doing it just to mess with people. But they said, we noted in the 1 week there's 12,000 anti-Semitic tweets. Well, there are 6,000 posts on X every single second. Why are you doing a story at all on 12,000 tweets? Who cares? But they're
Yeah.
making it a big crisis because fear brings clicks. Do a
Mhm.
search sometime on how many times you will see the word destroy intermedia stories. They're destroying women's sports. They're destroying Donald Trump. They're destroying Elon Musk. I got a saying I put in a Wall Street Journal op-ed some years ago. Nothing can destroy us unless we let it.
Right.
And when you say bad things like that, when you speak the way the Democrats do, and all of that terrible fear mongering, your own unconscious mind hears that and believes every single word of it. And you end
Right.
up in a really bad mood.
Mhm. So, folks, we're talking with Dennis Neal, who's the author of a great new book called The Leadership Genius of Elon Musk, which just released in January of this year. Dennis, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk to you, ask you specifically about DOGE, which is a project that was created almost specifically, ideally for Elon Musk. Uh, President Trump promised that he would do it, and he followed through on that. Originally, Vivek Ramaswamy was part of that, but then he went off, and it looks like he's going to become the next governor of Ohio, which seems to me would be a great thing for the people in that state. But the project of DOGE, it looked so promising in the early days, the first 100 days, where they're revealing all these incredible wastes of money, sending emails to all these government employees who aren't actually at their desks. What do you think the future of DOGE is at this point, given what's happened with Elon Musk, and in the context of this great
Yeah.
bill that was just passed, the
Right.
spending bill? What do you think the future is of DOGE, and will Elon Musk be a part of that long term? What are your thoughts?
Okay, so let's. I mean, I try to maintain an optimistic outlook. So let me just take the upside first, but then there's real caveats to that. The upside is that for the first time that I can recall in 20 or 30 years, we are talking about government spending and we are angry about it. And we are
Right.
examining it thanks to DOGE. That's first. Second, they've fallen way short of their goals. But Elon went in again, you overpromise. He went in saying, I want to cut $1 trillion out of the $2 trillion that we spend more than we take in every year. That's the deficit, right? That's the overspending every year. We take in 5 trillion, we spend 7 now. We jumped up to that in COVID and never went back down because government spending never goes back down. All right, so he's at 160, 170 billion over 10 years. It's 1.7 trillion because it keeps compounding. Okay, that's a start. But more than that is great leadership requires that you put in place great people to execute your vision once you're gone. And, on May 2nd on Jesse Waters' show on Fox, they just had another session with these Doge kids. One guy's talking about how they went into the Institute for Peace, which gets 55 million a year from the government. And at the end of the year, instead of giving back any unexpended funds, they put it into a slush fund. This kid was too young to even use that word, slush fund. And they use it for parties and private jets. Well, they found that out. And this group, deleted a terabyte of data. That's like a quadrillion, but that's like and they found it. So those kind of people now are across government, thanks to Doge and Elon Musk, and the benefits they find and the scandals that they find. You see cabinet secretaries now talking more about it. You learn that 7,000 NGOs get 90% of the $300 billion that we pay out every year, and that billions of it round trip back into the pockets of politicians here. You learn things like, I mean, it's just amazing. And this is going to lead somewhere. We now know that 1.4 million illegal aliens have Social Security numbers and they're on Medicaid, which is now the number one or number two budget item in most states because there are too many able-bodied people on the program. Millions of young men who are unemployed. They ought to be forced to get a job. There's no way they should be on Medicaid. Enough already. And so
Mhm.
I think the conversation has changed and we have examples. That's all the good stuff, right? Now the bad. Republicans, you you guys couldn't even manage to codify these cuts into law. You can't even manage to rally and show support for this. I mean, Democrats, you actually would protest against this. Both parties feed at the trough.
Yeah.
Republican, they're getting just as rich as Democrats. Both parties do insider trading. They're allowed to. It's why someone on a $170,000 salary ends up being worth 10 or $20 million. And so the thought that both parties are going to do anything to fix this long term unless they're absolutely forced to is kind of a stretch.
Mhm.
And in this country, we are ineffectual and feckless until something is a crisis.
Right.
And once finally there's a crisis, then we grow some and we do something about it. But if you wait till the crisis this time, oh my God, it's going to be so painful. And
Mhm.
Elon Musk tried to change that. And I think he's backing away, not because he's been cowed, because, oh gosh, this was too hard. He's backing away because he's disgusted.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he knows that there is a crisis of debt, and if it isn't reduced, that there's going to be no way to avoid that crisis that's coming, and so he's committed to that. But by the same token, not to defend them, it is very difficult to remove government-sponsored entitlements once they're in place, isn't it? And of
Right.
course,
Because it's,
yeah,
yeah, it's called, because any cut of fraud is called, "You're cutting Medicaid benefits." And my gosh, there's been recent op-eds in the Wall Street Journal, I was just trying to find it yesterday, showing you just how much incredible waste there is on, understand in 1964 under LBJ and the war on poverty, Medicaid was for moms with little tiny toddlers. They can't afford, daycare. They can't get a job. Okay. And disabled elderly people, not even disabled 30-year-old, disabled elderly people. And today you got, millions of young men getting their crazy check because, they're depressed and they're on disability. You know, the kinds of disability that is easiest to fake, which is mental and back pain, went up by 150 to 200% during the Obama era. And we
wow,
know under DOGE that employees who were sending out checks in these programs in 20 years, in 25-year careers, they had never questioned a check. They had never rejected a request. They are paid to give the money out. Our
right.
Treasury Secretary just said the government gives out 1.5 billion payments of various kinds a year, and 500 million of them, a third, had no tracker number so we can know where the money even went.
Mhm. Mhm.
We know
Reminds me
this
of
again under
yeah,
DOGE.
yeah. Reminds me of what Margaret Thatcher famously said is that at some point the government runs out of other people's money, and so there has to be an end to all this. And Doge, I think, is still a promising concept, even though perhaps it hasn't, as you put it, hasn't met its very lofty goals. I
But
think
it's
my
a
sense
start.
is it's still doing a lot of good work. It's
It's
still a
changed
step in the
the
right direction, isn't
conversation.
it? Hmm.
Leighton, it's changed the conversation, and what I've learned in watching Trump 2.0 is we should all think about this, guys. The universe can be changed just by
Yes.
saying something out loud,
Hmm.
can it? I mean Trump, the first term, he says, "What is this with this NATO? And we're paying all their defense. They're not paying, it's the time you started paying more." And all the pundits in the media, "Oh, he doesn't understand. He's just so naive." Well, it led to true change. And look what he said about Greenland. And suddenly, suddenly Greenland
And Canada, for
waking
that
up.
matter.
And Canada, I mean, and all he did was say it. And the tariffs are in the same vein. Understand
Yeah.
something. The tariffs, they're created out of nowhere. But
Mhm.
now he has a cudgel and a carrot.
Yeah.
Now he can reduce them, he can raise them, he can broaden them, he can narrow them, he can, slap it on an enemy, he can reward a reprieve to a friend. He has far more negotiating power. And then what happens, man? Freaking Rand Paul, a supposed Republican, is jealous and he files a bill saying, I think we should actually, Congress needs to approve these kind of tariff things instead. Dude, what are you doing? Get out of the man's way.
Yeah.
He's making things happen just by saying stuff.
Mhm. Well, this may be, one of the things or maybe the major thing that Donald Trump has in common with Elon Musk because, when I first heard that Elon Musk wanted to take rocket ships to Mars, let alone colonize Mars, I was scratching my head thinking, "Well, why? Why Mars?" But, of course, I guess his answer would be, "Well, why not? Why not Mars? Why not take the human project?"
Yeah.
Maybe he envisions a necessity to that is beyond the scope of most people's imagination, that's part of what you talk about in the book, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, this is the contradiction in Elon Musk. I opened the book with an epigram. I thought it was an epitaph, but no, that's the thing on a tombstone in a cemetery. An epigram, which you would know. And it says, he told this to Joe Rogan in 2018. I'd rather be optimistic and wrong than pessimistic and right. That's a
Oh,
great way to live
that's a
your
good one.
life, and it's a great way to, by the way, build your own business because capitalism is optimism monetized. You
Mhm.
invest in a given thing because you think it's gonna grow, right? So he's an incredible optimist and he dreams huge, and yet at the same time, the reason he is so desperate to get to Mars, become a multi-planetary society, is because he believes one day the Earth will either blow itself up or go extinct and all of life will cease to exist. We've got to have somewhere to flee. And he says the moon is too close.
Right.
It'll get taken out in an explosion of the
Yeah.
Earth.
Yeah.
So we got to get to Mars.
Fascinating. Well, speaking of projects and being optimistic about them, let's talk a little bit about your podcast. It's called What's Bugging Me. This
Yeah.
is on the Ricochet Network. I watched a couple episodes of this and really enjoyed them. I watched the one called Cover Ups and Other Magic Tricks, and also Donald of Arabia, which
Yeah.
I thought was great. So, tell us about the podcast.
Yeah.
What was the impetus for starting the podcast, and
Thanks
what do you
for
enjoy
asking.
about doing it?
Yeah. I'm having so much fun. So, I was a journalist for a lot of years at all those big brands. And then, a decade ago, I was fired by Fox with 15 minutes warning. Hey, grab some stuff, man. We're gonna have a security guard escort you out. Don't worry, we'll ship the rest of the stuff in your office to you. And my contract was up and they needed to cut the budget or whatever. But I was just devastated by this. And I waited for those offers to roll in because by golly, I'd had my own show for 6 months at CNBC at 8 o'clock at night. They canceled it for low ratings, but damn, it was good. And I waited for those offers to roll in, and my agent told me, "Well, we're kind of running out of network." So none came and no one would hire me. And I kept
Mhm.
wondering why. Was I too conservative? Was I just not very good at television? Was I? And so I kind of went into private consulting and lots of content creation and wrote 3 books for clients and helped Lou on that book, The Trump Century. But then Ricochet came to me on the advice of a friend and said, how would you like to do a podcast? We'll host it for you. We'll put it together. You have to figure out the guests, the topics. You have to do everything. But then luckily I paired up with this incredibly talented producer named Brian Johnson, who produces six shows at the network, And man, and you know what? I'm very proud of it, Leighton. It's a professional show. It's a
It sure
real
is.
show.
Yeah, it's
You know,
great. Mhm.
It's as good as many of the shows that I see on cable news, okay?
Yeah.
And it's sharper and smarter and it's more controversial and more honest. And I'm just having a ball. The brain is happy when it's learning new things. And so I'm just inhaling information. And you have this X platform now that is an amazing data gatherer for yourself. And you can set up folders and with bookmarks and by topic start to save data and great rants. And then you're grabbing sound. And so, lesson 6 of my book says free speech is everything. Stand up and be heard. And lesson 7 says on the media, to hell with them. They're shameless shills. And so my podcast is an answer to both. This is how I'm standing up and being heard and pushing back because our country was losing itself
Mhm,
and
mhm,
too many of us were standing down.
mhm,
So I'm
mhm.
using my connections and we talk about politics and policy. We like to talk about markets and investing, but also I love doing some personal stuff. I just did one about how I went to my high school reunion, a big one. And you're there with all these other people. All of you were 17, 18 years old, the same time in the same place. It's decades later, and now some of you are looking pretty good, and some of you aren't. And my gosh, and you then see the list of those who have passed away in these decades. And you realize that life is this minefield and you're marching forward and there's people left and right getting taken out, man. And we've got to be happier that we're alive and still marching, that we're
Yeah.
alive and well. We've got to be more grateful for that because life is just wonderful. Even if you're sitting on the sofa watching another episode of Love After Lockup, one of my favorites, reality show, life is glorious and we've got to see it that way. It's not that bad things don't happen. Bad things do happen, but we can choose how we choose to see them, how we
Mhm.
wanna feel
Mhm.
about them. And today, too many people are fear-mongering and getting all upset. There's a better way.
Mhm. Well, what a great message that is, and, if that isn't a good reason to tune into what's bugging me, I don't know what could be. Folks, we've been talking with, Dennis Kneale, who has his own podcast, what we just talked about, but also has written, a really compelling new book called The Leadership Genius of Elon Musk. But we did talk about how, uh, his concept of failure is part of his genius. But this
Yes.
book is available, and it's described here as one of the most influential figures of our time. Elon Musk is the most talked about man in America who isn't running for president yet. Not sure if he can because he's not born in
Not
America.
yet.
But I've heard that Trump is into constitutional amendments, so maybe he'll make
Right,
that
there
one
you go.
too. But this book, I think, if you've been listening to this conversation, you'll be fascinated to read it. And it's being added to our reading list. The other book that we're adding to our reading list is one that our guest was a significant contributor to. It's called The Trump Century: How Our President Changed the Course of History Forever. That was released about 5 years ago in 2020. Dennis, I wonder if you could explain what that book is about, and maybe if it was influential in your decision to write your most recent one about Elon Musk.
Yeah, that is where I started seeing all these parallels, right? That's such an insightful question, and a point on your part. And I got involved in that project late. They were running really late on the book. The first draft, Lou didn't quite. He said, "I just didn't even recognize it." Uh, so I came in and rescued it and pulled it out of there, okay, and was so proud because I love Donald Trump, and I've met the guy, and, and what Lou wanted to do is he wanted to argue that, "Look, he's running for reelection right now. Let's get out before the election. I'd like to have him get reelected, but even if he doesn't, things have changed forever because he was in that office, even in a first term." And that was so prescient, right? That was so right. So many things changed because Trump was in office. And so that's what he wanted to show and prove. And so
Mm.
we went chapter by chapter. And that's why I know this tariff tantrum we're seeing everywhere, way overdone. We've seen this movie before. When Biden came in, he removed almost every Trump order there was on everything. He left the tariffs largely in place. Why? Because they didn't contribute to inflation at all, the way all the experts say it's going to lead to inflation. All of this fear mongering, and I was very impressed with Trump. And then it turns out the editor on that book is the guy who gave me the Elon book. He
Ah.
wrote an email to me and said, "Look, you did a good job helping us out on that, but can you find a good business writer who might write a management book on how Elon does what he does?" And I just thought, Yeah, yeah."
You're the guy.
Uh,
You stepped
and
into
so
the
I owe
breach.
him. Yeah, I owe
Mhm.
him big time. He's a truly talented editor. The first time he edited the, uh the Trump book for Elon for Lou Dobbs, I wrote a lot of it. So I'm taking personally every change the editor's trying to make in the margin there. And I'm reading these notes and I think he's just a liberal. He's just a liberal. But actually, every single change this guy, Eric Nelson, made was so on point, made the story better, made the argument sounder. I mean,
Mhm.
he was just incredible. And I never think that any editor working on my work is doing a good job. So
Mhm.
I'm a hard handle, as they used to call it at
Yeah.
the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, editing when it's done well is a really underappreciated talent, isn't it? Whether it's
Yeah,
in written work or in film, or in recording, if you can have somebody who's talented who can use that lens to actually improve the quality of the
yeah,
work that's been done,
and
that's a
help your
talent.
writer and help your writer say things that they didn't know they could say
Right.
because they're
Yeah.
mired down in the tangle of it, worried about being wrong about stuff. And a lot of times there's more far bolder things you could say that they've managed to support. Yeah.
Mhm,
It's a
mhm,
joy. I love to edit. And, my frustration was I was always a much better editor than I was a writer. And yet the
mhm.
writers are the stars, baby.
Well, you're the star now, having written this book, The Leadership Genius of Elon Musk. Folks, we've been talking with Dennis Kneale, the author of this book. So grateful to have him here to talk to us about it. Also, we've talked about his podcast called What's Bugging Me on the Ricochet Network. I can tell you I've watched a couple episodes. It's really great. But Dennis, before you go, I wonder if you could tell us where could people find you, find your content? Obviously, the book is available on Amazon and anywhere they buy books. One thing I wanted to ask you though, are you planning to do an audio version of the book?
There's an audio version out now,
Oh,
and
great.
I'm delighted to say, Leighton, that they let me do it with my voice. I would have paid
Oh,
them to let me do that,
perfect.
man.
I
And it's my voice with this level of
Yeah,
enthusiasm and I'm just waiting for, once again, the voice offers to pour in for people to realize we love your voice and we want to use it for our ad and we want to use it for this
yeah,
and that. I think the most important thing is we gotta keep getting up to bat.
yeah,
You gotta keep
yeah.
swinging, if you don't make it past the fences, if you strike out, I don't care, man. I have a
Mm,
saying that no, which I get a lot of no's, is just the beginning of not yet.
mm.
So, yeah, thank you so much. So you can find
I'm
me though, my main platform is X, at Dennis Neal. It's
right.
Kneale there. And I've got a website, but it's inactive and I gotta crack that thing back open. And I got a column on newsmax.com. Oh, and please check me out every Sunday morning, 8:40 a.m. I'm on set in Manhattan at Newsmax talking about what's bugging me. They
Oh,
call the segment
wonderful.
"Are You Kidding Me?" But I've been telling them they ought to rename it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Leighton. You know what? This is such a thoughtful interview. I just love your style and technique, and I think also you have the advantage. I used to have to do interviews, in about 3 minutes time, and you just don't quite get the thoughtful
No.
questions the way
Especially
you.
not especially not in a topic as important as this one, and somebody
Yeah,
who's such an interesting character as you are. I'm very pleased to learn that you've done, that there is an audiobook because I love audiobooks, but I don't know if you agree with this, Dennis, but I find that the audiobook experience is so much enhanced when the author reads their own book. So I'm really
right.
excited. Yeah, I'm gonna
Instead of
download the
instead of
audio
some
version for
disembodied
sure.
voice of some guy who didn't have any skin in the game, man.
Yeah.
I sat in that booth with the headphones on, and some water, and it's all acoustic and padding everywhere, and I was just drunk with power. I mean,
Yeah.
I felt like Barry White. Baby, baby.
That's wonderful. Well, folks, we've been talking with Dennis Neal, the author of The Leadership Genius of Elon Musk. If you like what you heard, please post a comment on it and give us a follow on X. Dennis, we want to thank you so much for all that you're doing for writing this brilliant book. We've added both of the books that you've written, giving you credit for the Dobbs book, to our reading list. And we just want to thank you for all the tremendous work that you're doing and for being our special guest here today. It's been a real pleasure meeting you and learning more about your book.
Please keep in touch. Anytime you lose a guest and need someone to step in at any moment, as you can tell, there's an awful lot bugging me. I'm happy to talk about it, but I'm so appreciate this opportunity to be able to reach your audience. Okay. Have a glorious day, sir. And I owe you.
Thanks, Dennis.